Typhus, formerly known as Calas Typhon, is the first captain of the Death Guard Traitor Legion and the herald of the plague god, Nurgle. For over 10,000 years, Typhus has been a blight upon the Imperium, leaving a trail of despair and pestilential corruption in his wake as he leads his plague fleet across the vast expanse of the galaxy. Those who succumb to his diseases are often doomed to endure a fate worse than death. Victims of the zombie plague are transformed into plague zombies that are capable of spreading the disease to others through their bites, condemning them to undeath, while those who succumb to Nurgle's rot become transformed into demonic creatures known as plague bearers. Not only is Typhus a powerful and exceptionally skilled warrior upon the battlefield, but he is also a potent psyker, capable of laying waste to his enemies with the energies of the warp. As the chosen herald of Nurgle, his standing in the eyes of the plague god equals, if not exceeds that, of the demon Primarch Mortarion and the Great Unclean One, Kugath. Born upon the toxic world of Barbarus, Calas Typhon would be the first human encountered by Mortarion prior to the Emperor of Mankind's reunion with the Primarch. Typhon would form a strong bond of friendship with Mortarion due to both men being seen as freaks and outsiders by others, and would fight alongside the Primarch as part of Mortarion's Death Guard in their war against the beings known as the Overlords. Following the Emperor's reunion with Mortarion and the death of Mortarion's foster father, the Overlord known as Nakare, the Master of Mankind gifted the Primarch command of the Dusk Raiders Legion, which Mortarion would rename to the Death Guard, in honor of those who had fought alongside him against the Overlords. Calas Typhon would be inducted into the Death Guard, becoming a member of the Legione Astartes. Despite being a powerful psyker, Typhon would keep his abilities suppressed due to Mortarion's distrust of warpcraft. In spite of this, Typhon would come to be regarded as a near-legendary figure within the Legion, famed for his skill and resilience, and eventually Typhon would rise to the rank of First Captain. Prior to the events of the Horus Heresy, Typhon, thanks to the actions of Erebus, the High Chaplain of the Wordbearers Legion, would fall to the worship of the Chaos god Nurgle, with his proselytization to Chaos predating that of Mortarion and even the War Master Horus Lupercal. During the course of the Heresy, as the Death Guard Legion began to make their journey towards Terra, Typhon would have all the navigators within the Legion executed by his Grave Wardens, claiming to Mortarion that they were in fact agents of Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terra. Typhon then claimed that he and a number of his specialists, individuals that were essentially Space Marine librarians in all but name, could lead the Death Guard out of the warp. But this series of events was in fact a trap to turn the entirety of the Death Guard towards the embrace of the Plague God. A contagion known as the Destroyer Plague began to spread throughout the fleet, transforming the warriors of the Legion into bloated, cadaverous vessels of disease. Mortarion would confront Typhon aboard the ship the Terminus Est, and the two would engage in a fierce duel. Typhon would be slain by the Primarch, cleaved apart by his power scythe, but Typhon would rise from the dead. Mortarion would unleash the demonic entity that had formerly been Second Captain Ignatius Grulgor upon Typhon, in an attempt to stop the madness being unleashed by the First Captain. Grulgor would strangle the life out of Typhon, but the First Captain would once again return to life. Typhon would then merge with Grulgor as his body became the very embodiment of Nurgle's blessings, transforming him into the being now known as Typhus, the Herald of Nurgle. The rest of the Death Guard would fall to chaotic corruption shortly thereafter, and would lay siege to Terra not as proud and noble Astartes, but as foul Plague Marines. When the traitor legions were driven into the warp space rift known as the Eye of Terror, Typhus would become sickened by Mortarion's decision to mold the image of his newly gifted Plague Planet into that of Barbarus, viewing such an action as sentimental weakness. Typhus would then abandon his Gene Father to forge his own path, leading a vast plague fleet in his own campaigns to spread the gifts of Nurgle throughout the Imperium. And yet, despite being one of the most notorious and feared of all Traitor Legion Astartes, the fact that Typhus was able to become a Space Marine to begin with is nothing short of miraculous. In order for a potential aspirant to be transformed into an Astartes, they must undergo the gene seed implantation process. Potential recruits are vigorously screened for biological compatibility, as only a relatively small number of individuals are capable of accepting the various gene seed organs of an Astartes, and even then, a small percentage of those deemed as suitable candidates may perish or reject the implants during the requisite surgery. Those failed aspirants whose bodies refuse these implants will still be able to serve the chapter in some way, often as thralls and servants to the Astartes. Because potential candidates are forced to undergo stringent tests to assess their genetic compatibility, this means that only baseline humans that are free of mutation are capable of being transformed into an Astartes through the gene seed implantation process, making it impossible for an abhuman, such as a ratling or an ogrin, to become a Space Marine. While Calas Typhon's mother was a baseline human, his father was not. In fact, his father was one of the Barbaran overlords, creatures stated to be something other than human. Typhon's conception was as a result of this particular overlord forcing itself upon his mother. At some point during Typhon's childhood, the rest of his village would drown his mother after learning that she had conceived a child with an overlord. The villagers would also attempt to subject Typhon to the same fate, although he would manage to escape. Even so, Typhon would be rendered as an outcast amongst the Barbaran people due to the fact that he was, in his own words, a half-breed, although people would eventually warm to him during Mortarian's war against the Overlords. While the Overlords of Barbarus were stated to be different from the world's baseline humans, just what type of creatures they were is up for debate. It has been implied, if not outright stated in multiple sources, that the Overlords were members of a Xenos race. One such source is that of the short story Grandfather's Gift, which details the following after Mortarion discovered Nakare's soul within the Garden of Nurgle.
His Xenos species was steeped in empirical power. He remained whole. Might like that was rare. Though his kind were extinct in the flesh, their souls lingered in the warp.
At least one of their number, a minor overlord named Volkral, did indeed sport an inhuman appearance, as detailed within the novel The Buried Dagger, reinforcing the possibility of the overlords being a Xenos species.
Only vaguely humanoid in nature, Volkral's skull was a distended egg shape, seemingly too large for the bird-like neck it sat upon.
This would suggest that Typhus's genetic makeup is literally half human, half Xenos. Other human-Xenos hybrids have been shown to exist within the Imperium, with one of the most notable examples being that of Ael Wintor. Ael Wintor was a confidant of Malkador the Sigillite, who was revealed to be half human and half Eldari. However, Wintor's hybridized genetic sequence was a result of artificial DNA splicing and cloning as opposed to a natural hybridization that occurred through procreation. Yet, there is a possibility that the Overlords were formerly human, or at the very least, a type of abhuman strain before they had fallen to corruption. Within The Buried Dagger, Mortarion, prior to abandoning his foster father's citadel, would discover the following information regarding the origin of the Overlords from a series of ancient tomes that belonged to Nakare.
Some suggested that the Overlords had come from another place and taken up residence on Barbarus, inflicting their callous rule upon the Lessers. There were hints they might have once been human, or human-like, until a change had been wrought upon them in the wake of a cataclysmic pact with a monstrous, unknown power. With the reality lost after thousands of years, the full truth was nowhere to be found.
Regardless whether his biological father was Xenos, mutant, or a member of an abhuman strain, this would surely have rendered Calas Typhon as being ineligible for becoming elevated into the ranks of the Legione Astartes. So, how did Typhon manage to become a Space Marine? According to Typhus's Warlords of the Dark Millennium article, the exact process undertaken to transform him into an Astartes is unknown, lost to even his own memory. Despite this, Typhon was noted to have excelled in the endurance contests staged by the Legion that all potential aspirants were forced to participate in before being transformed into Space Marines. Given that the Buried Dagger describes Typhon as being a young man prior to the Emperor's arrival upon Barbarus, it would seem to imply that Typhon was, at the very least, in his late teens or possibly his early 20s. If this were indeed the case, then Typhon would simply have been too old to undergo the gene seed implantation process, as certain organs will only function as intended if introduced prior to the aspirant reaching a certain level of physical development. That being said, however, Typhon could still have been elevated to the ranks of the Legione Astartes by being subjected to intense surgical alteration. There were many individuals who served alongside their respective Primarchs prior to their reunion with the Emperor who proved to be far too old to receive gene seed implants, yet were still able to become a Space Marine even if they were not a true Astartes. Two of the most notable of these individuals would be Luthor of the Dark Angels Legion, who himself was a fully grown man by the time he was inducted into the Legion, and Corpheron of the Wordbearers Legion, the adoptive father of the Primarch Lorgar, who was even older by far. However, such surgical alterations are not without risk, as many of those individuals who were too old to undergo the gene seed implantation process were known to have perished upon the operating table despite the best efforts of the Legion's apothecaries. Such methods are the only possibilities that can feasibly explain as to how Calas Typhon, who was not only a grown man, but also seemingly a human Xenos hybrid, could have become inducted into the ranks of the 14th Legion. The only other question is, just how many other legions could potentially have had Xenos hybrids within their ranks? What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.